I get a lot of people commenting on my videos each week asking stuff like, how do you make these? What programs do you use? And OMG, you should totally do a video explaining how you make these if you're ever struggling for time to make a video one week because of an overload of uni assignments. Yeah, okay, no one's ever asked that, but that's still what I'll be doing in this video. From transcribing the music to finding the right sounds to rendering out my video and putting it on YouTube, I'll be covering every single aspect so you'll never have another question to ask ever again. If you're curious about any part of the process in particular or want to skip past something you already know about, I've put the time codes for each section on the screen. They'll also be in the description and the pinned comments so you don't have to come back to this point in the video to refer to them. Now this video will be a lot different to what I usually upload in this channel, so if this is the first thing you've seen by me, make sure you check out my other content before considering subscribing. More importantly, go give my actual Giorno theme remake a watch, even if you've seen it already. Before I talk about each step in my process, I feel like it's important to cover what programs I use to make my remakes. A lot of you may know this, but for everything music related, I use Ableton Live 10 Lite, which is a digital audio workstation, or a DAW. I only have the Lite version because my MIDI keyboard came with a copy of it, and it's pretty much all I need. The only other music related software that I sometimes use for extra effects that Ableton doesn't have is Audacity, which is a free application for both Windows and Mac. As for the visuals and anything related to video editing, I use Vegas Pro 17. I've been using variants of Vegas Pro since the 11 version, and I've never made the switch to anything else since it does everything I need. The only downside is that it's not amazingly optimized in that it crashes fairly often, but apart from that it does the job really well. I'll get into more specifics about how I use it later in the video. So the first step of my music remake video creation process is to transcribe the song that I'll be covering. If you don't know what that means, it's basically getting all the notes for every instrument written out in front of me in some form so I can work with them. The way I do this the majority of the time is by literally sitting on my computer for hours and hours, listening to the song over and over again and notating each note I hear until I have the entire song done. I do this in Ableton Live through the use of MIDI tracks. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, although that doesn't really explain much in this context. From my own words and experience, MIDI tracks basically let you write out music notes in a super simple format, only taking into consideration their length and pitch. To hear what these notes sound like, you need to drag in an audio file or instrument built into Ableton onto the MIDI track, which will assign it to the notes you've written. Depending on where you've placed the notes and how long they last, you should get a good idea of what they sound like. The only limitation with MIDI is that you can't change stuff like fade outs, tone, or the expression of each individual note. Each note in each layer depends on whatever sound you've used for the entire layer. Anyways, enough about MIDI and more into transcribing the song. For Giorno's theme, this process took so much longer than any other remake I've done. This is mostly due to the length of the song, but also the complexity of it in the sense that it had a massive array of instruments and some insane instrumental solos that I had to notate by ear. When I start transcribing a song, I usually start with the percussion since that's the easiest to do and serves itself as the foundation of the song. I do this on a single MIDI track with a drum rack where I can have multiple drum sounds on one track depending on what notes I placed. For example, all the MIDI notes on this C will play the kick drum, all the notes in this D will play a snare drum, and so on. Anyways, next up is the bass or melody, whichever I feel like tackling first. For any melodic sounds, which are sounds that make a pitch, so basically not percussion, I apply the default grand piano instrument to my MIDI layers so I can hear what notes I'm putting in well before I decide what sounds to use. Preceding the melody and bass, the final parts I have to transcribe are all the inner parts. These could include chords, arpeggios, which are basically chords but played in an ascending or descending manner, strings, choirs, you name it. Sadly for me, Giorno's theme pretty much had all of them, which added to the extremely long time that it took to transcribe the song. After many hours of work though, I finally finished notating Giorno's theme and could finally move on to the next stage of the process. Now this is the part that for some reason everyone wants to know about, and I hate to break it to you, but there really isn't much to it. There's no simple process to figuring out what sounds to use for each instrument other than just trial and error and having enough experience with Minecraft that I can remember most sounds and figure out what sounds I could use in my head. The only bit of structure I have to this part is where I go through the entire folder of Minecraft sounds and grab all the sounds I could possibly need for that video, so for Giorno's theme, every sound that relates to gold, and copy them to their own separate folder. Once I have all the sounds in one spot, I can start going through them all and hoping that things will work. With the percussion for our case study, using a gold block being placed or destroyed was fairly common sense for me as it already sounds like a kick drum. The snare took a bit of thinking, but in the end the gold pickaxe breaking worked pretty well. The quiet tapping noises of the gold pressure plate sprung to mind straight away for whatever sound it replicated from the original, so that didn't take too much trial and error. What did take ages to figure out though was the hi-hat. No gold sounds that I could find naturally made a crisp, high-pitched sound, and the only thing close to that was the sound of eating any gold food. So from experience, I naturally knew that I had to pitch that sound up and I'd have what I needed. For the rest of the instruments, I looked around and the only sounds that made a melodic sound were the village bells and of course the bell noteblock sound, so they were what I used for the rest of the instruments. This is where I let you on a little secret though. The sound for the bass in my Giorno theme video appeared to be from a village bell, but in reality I used the bell noteblock sound just pitched down a ton with some EQ to get rid of the high frequencies. I'll go into more detail about what EQ is in the next section, but basically I did that because the village bell had too many overtones to sound good down low, and it was also quite a soft sound which wouldn't have worked well for the bass. It was still technically a gold sound that I used, but I just thought it would be more visually pleasing for the notebooks to just be used for melody and solos. There's no doubt that I can sometimes go a bit overboard with the effects I use to modify the Minecraft sounds I choose, but a lot of people don't understand how they work, so let me explain. One of the many effects I use is called equalization, or EQ for short. From what I understand and what I use it for, EQ is the process of altering the frequency range of a sound or sample of audio. Let me give you an example. Say I've got the sound of a bell noteblock in Minecraft, lowered to the pitch I want it to be at for the bass. As you can hear, there's more than one note being played where the higher one is unwanted. To get rid of it, I can apply a bit of EQ to get rid of the higher note or frequency, resulting in this sound. It can also be used for the opposite effect to get rid of the low end of the sound, which is common for me when I'm editing a sound for a melody as I don't want it to sound too bassy. Two effects that do a similar thing to EQ are high pass and low pass filters. These basically allow only the high or low frequencies of a sound to pass through once you apply the filter. This is what I use in Audacity for more precise cutoffs when Ableton's EQ plugins don't quite do the trick. Another effect I use for a lot of sounds in my music remakes is reverb. What's reverb, you ask? Well, just imagine you shout something in a massive open concert hall like, "Hello!" That echoing, sustaining effect that you hear is called reverb. I usually use it in my videos for sounds that are short and don't ring out much, so they can sound a lot fuller. For a similar reason, I also reverse some sounds depending on how they're structured. I didn't do this in Giorno's theme, but to give an example, I reversed some ghast sounds in my Ghost Fight remake. The reason for this was because the ghast cries faded into the note, which is the opposite of what I want. By playing them in reverse, I get a sound that sounds strong and fades out, like most musical instrument sounds do. These are just the main effects I use in my videos, apart from obviously cutting and pitch lowering or raising sounds, but those are fairly self-explanatory, so I didn't bother covering them in much detail. If I've missed anything that you want to know about, just comment below and I'll try my best to answer you. So after writing out the song, applying the right sounds, and using the appropriate effects for each sound, you'd think that I have all the hard work done, right? Wrong. I still have so much to do to make the actual video for the music, which is ultimately a lot more tedious and time consuming. The first step of all of this is to record the clips for each instrument. Now to make sure each panel on screen in the final product is distinct and unique, I use a different biome for each of them. For this reason, I have a whole list of Minecraft worlds customized to specific biomes to make this easier. Anyways, once I've randomized the biomes for each instrument clip, I go ahead and start setting up each scene. For any sound that comes from a block or something that isn't a mob, this is pretty straightforward. I just have to center it as best as I can in the middle of the screen, hit record, and do whatever action I need to do. The only outlier to this is the note block. See, with note blocks, they can emit 25 different colored music notes when hit, depending on the pitch of the note that it's set to. To keep the visuals for the note blocks legit, I had to record me hitting a note block 25 times in 2 different biomes, both with a 10-second break between each hit. For most other sounds like the pickaxe breaking for the snare or the bell being hit for everything else, I only had to record one clip, which made things super easy. Another type of clip that can be a lot trickier to set up than normal is anything involving a mob, since they move around so much. There aren't any mobs in my Giorno's theme remake, but one of you asked how I get them to stand still when I do use them, and the simple answer is with barrier blocks. You can't see them, I can't see them, and they keep the mobs in place, which is all that matters. Lately though, I've been using a command that looks like this, which freezes every single mob in the game on the spot, which is also super handy. After I've recorded each clip, I always go through the unnecessary task of making sure the subject on the screen is perfectly centered to the nearest pixel and that the clip is trimmed down to only the bit that I need. To do so, I import each file into a Vegas Pro project, trim and crop away till I'm happy, and then render out each clip as a new MP4 file. This might seem a bit overkill, as you guys probably wouldn't notice if I didn't put as much effort into this step, but I guess it's just my mild OCD kicking in. It also helps me crop and rescale the clips a lot more efficiently in the next step of the process. As well as organizing the video clips, this is also the part where I export out the audio of my remake from Ableton, as well as the audio for each separate instrument or track. This will help in lining up the video clips for each instrument when I edit together the final video. Okay, so this is where it all comes down to, the editing of the video that you see while the music plays. This might take a bit to explain, so if you're still watching by this point, strap yourself in for a long explanation. The first thing I do is start up a new Vegas Pro 17 project and adjust the project properties according to the song's tempo. I put in the tempo and then I multiply the tempo by 0.8 and use whatever value I get as the project's frame rate. Now you might be thinking, why? Why would you ever need to use a frame rate of 108, and why did you need to multiply the tempo by 0.8? Well, basically, to line everything up to the music, I set the timeline to measures and beats so each increment corresponds to the music's tempo. By multiplying that tempo value by 0.8, this allows each frame of the project to line up as best as possible to each significant increment of the music. Each bar lines up with a frame, each half bar lines up with a frame, each quarter bar, eighth of a bar, all the way down to a 64th of a bar. By having the project set up like this, I can freely copy and paste clips without worrying about them going out of sync, since they always snap to the nearest frame. Once I've got that boring stuff out of the way, I import the audio clip of my full remake and then each instrument's audio clip above it in the same order that it was in Ableton to keep things organized. I then create a video track with some contrast and saturation effects applied to it and copy and paste it however many times I need for each instrument. From here, I color code and name each instrument layer so I know what layers what at all times, and then I import all of my cut down video clips into the project media tab ready to use. At this point, I now have everything I need to start putting the video clips in and lining them up to their respective audio clips. I mute everything else and put all the clips in layer by layer. Depending on the length of the song and how many instruments there are, this part alone can take up to 5 hours and haven't even got to cropping them and resizing them yet. Speaking of which, once all the clips are in place and have already endured multiple Vegas Pro crashes, it's time to do exactly that. Arrange all the clips on the screen to make the video look all fancy. There's no real method to this other than just going through and figuring out what instruments are being used at the current time and which ones will be most important to have on the screen, but there are some things I always keep in mind. I always want to make sure that the layout on the screen doesn't last for more than about 8 bars of music without some kind of alteration, otherwise it might seem super boring and lazy. I also try and include transitions wherever I can so each scene connects to the other and doesn't change drastically, although that's a lot easier said than done. Once all the clips have been cropped, resized and positioned though, all that's left to do is put in the white dividing lines to make everything look 10 times fancier. I do this by creating a bunch of layers at the top of the project and using some solid white colored media generators from Vegas with widths of 15 pixels. Resizing and positioning them is basically the same process as it is for the clips, so there isn't much else to say on that. With that though, the video is done. All I have to do now is whack the project in another project so it doesn't freeze while rendering, chuck my logo on and render it out at pristine 1080p 60 FPS quality. Of course, there's still the whole process of making the introductory section of the video where I'm talking about how I edited each sound, but to be fair, I don't really think anyone cares about that, so I'll just leave it at this. If you've made it this far though, and you haven't just skipped ahead to this part of the video, I really appreciate you. In fact, anyone that even watched more than a minute of this video is ranked highly in my books. I've really wanted to make a video like this explaining how to make my music remake videos for quite some time now, so if you enjoyed this, please smash that like button so I know you did. If I missed anything, leave a comment down below and I'll try my best to answer you, and subscribe if you want to see more of my content on this channel. Also stay tuned for my exclusive gaming channel coming soon. Anyways, that's all from me. Stay safe and I'll see you next time.